Welcome to the Madison Park Podcast. We're so glad you're here. Join us each week as we recap messages and take a deeper look at what God is doing in the community. For more information, find us on socials or visit madisonpark.church.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, the Mad Park Pod. I'm super excited y'all are here. Today we're talking about week 4 of No Offense, primarily around bitterness. Yes.
Yeah.
The first thing she talks about, though, and like, I'm curious, hot take here, road rage. Are you guys road ragers?
Absolutely.
Oh,
I'm not even kidding. She said road rage, and my mom looks at me and then looked back, and then every statistic, she was like, It's like, you don't have to look at me. I know. I'm really bad. That's probably my biggest sin.
What?
Is it a sin? Does it say that in the Bible? I'm just...
The things that I say.
Oh, I was going to say, do you hit all of the things that she brought up?
If you have 3 or more, you probably need to repent. Yeah, that's me.
I'm curious, what drives you crazy? That
Other
makes
people.
you road rage. But like, specifically what?
It could be anything. And I'm like, that was a stupid choice. Why would you do that? Like, literally today.
She's driving behind us.
Oh yeah,
you know that,
you're probably right behind me. I
We're
was told
grandparent
this
drivers.
morning I drive like a grandmother.
And I drive
by
like
Rhonda.
a grandma.
Okay,
which I love Rhonda.
So Dan drives much slower than I do, so that I have learned patience through just being married in a lot of ways. But he just drives much slower than me. So I like to be places fast. So I'm like, get out of my way. You're going too slow. So that's partially an issue. But even today, I was already going like between 80 and 85 in the fast lane. And this truck came up behind me and like tried to get around, like super fast up on my tail and then around me. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I was like,
Welcome to the ditch.
I'm going to the podcast. I need to like watch my language. I need to watch myself.
Steven's
Heather
probably
literally
gonna
talked
ask
about
road
this.
rage.
And I was like, Heather literally talked about this. I need to be better. So all I can say is, yeah, good choice. Or something like that.
You made a good choice.
I did, because usually it would have been much more colorful than that.
I'm the person that's like, oh, someone's coming up a mile behind. Let me get over. Okay, you guys go ahead. Go past.
I get road rage at myself. I go, I'm so sorry. I know. I want to get. I can't. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'll pull over so you can beat me.
I have.
Yeah, good deal.
Oh no, so they can go in front of me.
It's turned to corner.
I didn't hear that.
That's perfect. Yeah, so Ben, who's on the podcast pretty regularly, his brother does this thing where if he gets upset, he will stare at them in the eyes and give them a thumbs up while shaking their arm, like shaking his arm really hard. So it's like this like
Like
pent
you're
up anger thing.
seething with rage.
But it's so funny. I mean, just to watch it. Like, so that's what I always do. They combine like just like almost, having a seizure, I guess. I don't know.
Oh.
That's great. You're welcome.
I fake cry. What you gonna do? You're about to flip me off? I don't care. I'm crying in my car. Got a whole story ready.
Well, and your car specifically, people think they're about to drive up to a grandma. Instead, they
And
drive
it's
up
me
next
trying
to
my
a
best.
24-year-old
I make it look like the inside's on
sobbing.
fire and I'm crying. And I start hitting all the buttons.
Actually, I don't hate that. It's a very involved story, but I love it.
You get like, you're mad at me and then you're worried about, oh my gosh, is his car exploding? Is there a cat loose in
He's
his
on the way to
car?
the
Yeah.
hospital. It's okay. It's okay, everybody.
Oh, man.
He's going that slow, but he's on his way to the hospital.
His grandma's in the back seat.
Yes.
No, I just got 2 tires in my backseat right now.
It's fine. Colorado's a weird place.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Indiana, not really known for their drivers. Sorry, guys. It's true. We're slow. But you guys are even from Indiana, and you're slow.
Yeah, I'm from California, so I should be the opposite. But California, it's weird. Like driving here, people don't let you in. You have to force your way in. You have to find the right spot. In California, because there's so much traffic, people make space. Like you just know you're gonna like. There's just like this like art to it. So here I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I have to be aggressive. I'm not good at it. So
Yeah, well, that's fair. That's fair. Road rage, it's real.
It is.
This is a PSA.
Yeah.
Don't.
you need help. Please, I have nothing.
Call.
We see. Are you raging?
1-800.
We see you.
Are you raging?
God.
Text
1-800 the Bible.
Come to church on
So,
Sunday, Madison Park, 10 a.m.
So, to sort of get into this, if you're just joining us, we've done an entire series on offense. And what's interesting is I think that's a word that we probably all have a working definition for. This is sort of like really macro on that thing. And I think I've kind of realized as I'm like severely turning the page or turning the corner here from our road rage conversation, that at the beginning of the series, I don't know that I would have been like, oh man, I'm like holding some offenses. I think after sort of working through it, I've honestly come to the point of like, there are some things that I've held on to. And I'm sure I've offended people for sure, but there's some things I've held on to. And so today's sort of focus is on bitterness. And I'd be curious, and I'm not asking for like Webster's definition, but like, how do you guys define bitterness? How does it play out maybe in your life? Because I think bitterness is one of those words that like, again, a little bit like offense, we don't necessarily go to like, oh, I'm bitter. That doesn't feel like something that we would naturally sort of just like automatically connect to. So I'd be curious, like, pre the message, post the message, like what's your sort of working definition of bitterness and how it plays out in your life?
You went from a question about road rage and we jumped in real fast.
Yeah,
Got to bitterness and we didn't want to talk about it a whole lot.
Yeah.
So I can jump in. Bitterness is actually something that I think I've constantly been aware of in my life. And maybe that's weird. Maybe I should check why that's such a clear thing in my life. But bitterness to me is a veil from something in the past that is impacting how I understand my present or my future. So like some event happened, and if I don't deal with it, if I don't walk all the way through it, that almost becomes this like shield. So the next time I face someone and anything remotely feels or looks like that last situation, I come up against it with the past situation. And I even saw it a couple weeks ago. Something happened in my world where someone walked in and they didn't mean an offense, but all of a sudden I went from 0 to 60 on feeling anxiety and frustration and anger. And it had nothing to do with the situation. It's because I went, oh, I have something I have to work through that I didn't realize was still kind of this shield or this veil. And I think we do it to protect ourselves because we don't want to feel dumb or foolish or whatever by someone else coming in and taking advantage of us again, or someone coming in and hurting us in the same way. So I see it a lot. And I find that every once in a while something will just click and I go, oh, okay, that's not them. What is it that I'm responding to? What is it that I'm actually, and then I have to go back and deal with it, which is why I highly recommend therapy. It's wonderful.
Totally. I mean, well, let me ask this in response to that. Prior to this series and this message, would you have said that you were holding on to bitterness?
Oh, yeah.
Is that because of therapy or because it feels just like it was that real?
All of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above. This series, I think, has helped me recognize that maybe there's even remnants of things that you don't always realize are still there. I think sometimes I'm like, oh, worked through it, check, but it's not gone. And so this series helped me kind of track back and go, oh, there's some unforgiveness that I need to kind of go back and not necessarily deal with that person, but hey, if I let them go, what does this look like for me? So this series has helped me kind of work backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think this series has helped me, like specifically to that question, recognize smaller things that I'm bitter about. I think I've worked through I'm still working through many, but things that I'm bitter about, but I always see the bitter as some big problem, they hurt me, they did this, but I've realized recently, especially with the help of this series, that there's just some small things here or there that I was like, oh, I'm actually really bitter about this really small, inconvenient thing, and that's something that matters just as much as how badly this person hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah, and Kelsey and I were having a discussion, excuse me, sort of about the podcast, and we talked, I said something like this last week, so you don't need to go back and listen to it because I'm going to say it again. But like the whole idea of the podcast was birthed out of this idea that on Sunday we have this sort of finite amount of time to for Heather to preach, for there to be a service. And so, Heather and I talk about this all the time. Like, she gives you 3 hours worth of content in like 50 minutes. And a lot of times I'll be like driving to work 2 days in and be like, oh my gosh, like I actually am bitter and I didn't know. Like it takes you a long time to unpack it. So a huge part of the hope of this is like, number one, humanizing what it looks like to process in real time, like scripture, a message, sort of a word from the Lord. The other thing is like recognizing that there's different on-ramps and different ways to process some of these things. And so I think for me, kind of in a similar way, I agree with both things, what both of you said, but I have this moment of like, I don't think prior to the series I would have been like, oh man, I have some bitterness. But she read, and I'm just going to read it straight off her notes, and this is sort of when it started to get personal for me and where I've been hanging my hat. She read from Hebrews, and she said, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. And it's like, read the verse a bunch of times. I grew up in church, so it's like, yeah, okay. And then she showed like the picture of the tree and the idea of like what a root does and the vastness of it, and like the idea of the root being sort of the lifeline in a lot of ways to the tree. And I think it was at that point where I started to entertain the idea of maybe some bitterness, and so I think I'm sort of in this phase with this whole idea where I'm kind of doing the work of looking backward and going, oh shoot, maybe some of these things that I've like felt or wrestled with are not just like ambiguous things I can't define. Maybe it is like the root of bitterness. So like there's a question in all of this. Well, one, do you see that played out like the root of bitterness? And you kind of alluded to it, and I have a thought about it. But did the tree analogy do anything to like impact you in any way?
Yeah, I was actually really surprised by my students next to me at the time when she had said that. One of them leaned over and just wanted to give me a very fun scientific fact about roots. But it was helpful. I think it actually added to the metaphor that there are some trees, they're redwood trees, where their roots intertwine underground. So a forest of redwoods is at some point all one tree, I guess you could say, which is why they are some of the most resilient trees. And that's why we want to base our community like a redwood forest. We want to ground each other. But if we let bitterness grow like that, if we let big problems of bitterness let their roots interchange, it's hard to stem one out, if that makes sense. It's hard to get one out because when bitterness breeds bitterness, I think, and it's deep and it's underground. It's not something that you want to talk about all the time, or if you do talk about it, you're talking about the leaves of it, but you're never talking about the roots and where did that originally stem from. And I think it just breeds more and more and more. And if you have a forest of bitterness, how do you get that out?
Yeah.
But
well, I think too, it's interesting. Like she references earlier that bitterness starts with hurt. Like you don't just like, oh, I just got bitterness.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like catching a cold.
I got some bitterness today.
Yeah. But the idea, like, it starts off as hurt, and if you, even that verse in Hebrews, the idea of like dealing with it then when it's hurt versus letting it grow into this thing. And Kelsey, you said something just a second ago. So I'm sure I'll share part of this. My wife and I bought this house that was condemned. And it had no people living in it for like 10 years, and there's a lot of story there. But one of the first things we had to do before we could do much was dig up like trees and things. And what was interesting, we had this one like really big, vibrant tree that like half of it was dead. And so I guess the net effect, if you're what is it called if you're a tree person?
Arborist?
Arborist?
Arborist? I have a book on trees.
Sorry, if you are a tree professional. A tree professional. A tree professional told us that basically the tree starts to rob nutrients from the other side and pull it over. So when we dug this thing up, what we found out was there was another tree that had died and its roots had grown under it. And so this tree could not get its roots deep enough into the ground or around these old roots, and so it just like died. And so when she's talking about this, I'm having this vision of like, man, I probably have these sort of dead, bitter roots that I've never really dug up and like actually maybe forgiven somebody or like moved on, that are stunting the potential health of the tree. Like it's become this brick wall for this other thing. And so I think at least for me, and I have kids and watching them grow up, there's that metaphor of like bitterness growing was sort of this cautionary tale of like, hey, deal with your hurt on the front end, which I'm not good at doing. I mean, are most people good at doing that?
Probably not. I don't think so.
I don't really know.
I'm going to go with no.
Yeah.
The
I
fact
can't
that we all
think of
went,
a person.
Yeah.
I can't
that
think of a
one?
person
Probably
that
not.
does.
Well, like, yeah, and I think I'd be, okay, this is actually a good question. So if you can't see us, if you're just listening to this, I really want to say open your eyes, but that would be but anyway, I'm not going to. That's such a dad joke. I'm so sorry.
That's good.
There's two guys, there's two girls here right now. What?
Hi, I'm one of the other guys. I don't do it. Do we do it like a fit check? or-
I think I have a hard time admitting hurt. I'd be curious to know if that's gender specific or if you feel like that's person specific. Obviously you can have both. Like, do you have a hard time like identifying or like admitting it?
When I was younger, I very much did. But it was something that was very convicting when I was younger. My dad had the same thing. It was hard for him to be less than. He felt like he had to be the pillar of our family, which I feel like is something we put on a lot of people, especially men and husbands and fathers. And I very much saw it growing up at some points, and it hurt us as kids. And so my father passed away in 2017. But it was a big thing when that happened for a lot of different people, especially our family, of course. But one of the major things that happened in the end of his life is he did talk about his struggle a lot, but it wasn't at the front end. And so I learned then and there, I saw how him talking about his hurt helped people. So now I confront my hurt very quickly and flashy, maybe some a little too flashy. So we can get it out in the air, out in the open. I don't want my hurt to own me. I want to own my hurt. And if any of my hurt could help somebody, absolutely. So it's been something because I saw it the opposite direction.
Yeah. Kelsey,
yeah.
sidekick Kenzie.
I don't know that it's going to be gender specific. I'm going to guess it's probably not. For me, my dad growing up, well-meaning, I took it to an nth degree. My dad used to say, like, whenever someone hurt me or something happened and I'd be upset, he'd be like, okay, but what's your part to own? Okay, but can you imagine what brought them to the point where they would do this to someone else? And so I grew up making excuses for everyone all the time. So they didn't mean to hurt me. They didn't mean to say that. They have something going on at home. What did I do first? And some of that is good, right? Like I can stop and go, okay, what do I need to own before I can go confront this thing? Or maybe there are things in their life that I need to make room for grace. But I needed the truth piece too. So I have learned in my adult years how to kind of say it's okay if they have a piece to own. And so confronting that has been a new thing in the last, I'm going to say decade or so, maybe less. But it wasn't that it was hard to admit hurt. It was that I was always trying to excuse it. I don't know if that makes sense. So then I wasn't allowed to be hurt because it's not their fault. They didn't know. Yeah. So it shifted a little.
Oh, this is going to be good. The throat clear.
No, I don't think so, really.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, I would agree with Kelsey. I don't think it's a gender specific thing. Like for me growing up, I never wanted to admit being hurt or because for some reason to me it was a sign of weakness. Yeah. If you're hurt, if something happened that hurt you, then that means that you're weak. So I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to like show people that I was upset about things. I tried to always be strong. I don't know if any of that has to do with being the oldest daughter. But I just wanted to not admit that I had ever been hurt in any capacity. Yeah. As though to be maybe strong for my family, for my siblings, to take the brunt of things so no one else had to deal with it. But then not be hurt by it and not let it, because I probably didn't want it to consume me or anything. But then I had to get to a point where I was like, okay, but not dealing with it is what's consuming me. Not admitting that I'm hurt and having those conversations and having people that I can confide in and talk through the hurt to be able to move past it. It was just kind of festering and it would stay there.
Yeah.
So not acknowledging it didn't make it go away.
Yeah. It's interesting when I like have this visual, and I used to do this as a kid. I'm the oldest, and I kind of felt the same way. Like you're not allowed to be hurt. So like, and so I remember we were playing this game outside. I fell off my bike and like really hurt my arm. And it must look bad because like people ran over and I was like, no, I'm fine. We were like playing kickball and I could like barely run. And they're like, maybe you should take a break. I'm like, no, I'm good. And I'm like causing everyone to lose the game and it's not fun, but I'm like, hobbling around out there. And in my mind, I felt like I was fooling everybody. And that it was like the game was just getting played like normal and everyone's having a good time. In reality, like my hurt was like ruining this bigger situation. And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that in a similar way, like internal hurt, like not physical hurt, mental hurt,
I think emotional
spiritual hurt,
relational hurt.
All of the non-physical hurts, people can still see those and they still have an effect. Yeah. And so I think the reality ends up being about like, one, can you see it in yourself? And two, are you willing to address it? You guys both mentioned something like similar, that once you identified like hurt, like your dad, and then you were mentioning like even your dad and like addressing it faster. Do you feel like that has had an effect in a positive way on keeping bitterness from growing or like health, or like has that been a good tool?
There was a mix of it, especially when I first started. Like I said, sometimes I admitted it a little too loud, a little too fast before I had time to work through it. And so then everyone just got to watch me horrifically work through it. And that wasn't always great. But sometimes with being loud about it, sometimes not being loud about it, but just admitting it up front led to... Are you okay?
Sorry, I swallowed that so weird.
I thought I heard a sound.
I was like, oh my gosh, Stephen, that was not nonchalant at all.
I'm sorry. I was trying to be so quiet, and my throat made the funniest sound.
Do we keep those moments on this?
These stand. I'm sorry. That was like...
This is real time.
I thought I was drowning in my own body.
Yeah, that threw me off. All right. My bad.
You cried. No, you're good. You cried.
Our couch over here is doing just fine.
I'm so sorry.
You almost died.
Yeah.
I almost died.
No, leave the CPR part in the video.
Leave it in.
I'm
leave it
certified.
in. Okay, perfect.
Ooh.
I'm not.
Do we have an ED?
No,
I'm certified in that too.
I'm so sorry.
You're good.
I
It's by the
please
mom's
forgive
room.
me.
I know
You're
it
fine.
is.
You're fine. Admitting the hurt up front, admitting it so quickly and so fast, let some things of bitterness sneak past because I was trying to be so conscious about, well, I have to admit the hurt so no bitterness gets through. And in that, because I was staring at bitterness somehow, I think it even more got through on a couple certain things. That being said, what God and I have been working on recently about bitterness. If you've seen VeggieTales, there's the Jonah one, right? And we all know Jonah. Jonah was a prophet, right? Hoo, and he really never got it. There's a fun song.
Nailed it.
It's great. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely see it. VeggieTales. It's a classic. At the very end, Jonah delivers this message to Nineveh, and then he goes and sits on a hill, and he's played by an asparagus. That's a weird sentence. And he sits on this hill and he turns around just after telling Nineveh, this horrible town where they've done horrible things, they've murdered a bunch of people, that God will forgive them if they turn from their ways. And that he forgives them. The entire movie and the entire story is about him running from that, how you can't run from that. But as he finished telling them this great salvation, this great hope, this great grace, he then goes and sits on a hill, turns around and sits down and says, all right, God, I'm ready for you to destroy him. I'm waiting. How are you going to do it? Is it going to be like a big meteor? Is it going to, everyone bursts into flames? What are you going to do? And the little sidekick that he has, which is a worm, is like, what do you talk? You just talked about salvation. You just talked about hope, and you're still bitter that they get salvation and they get hope. And it's funny that we talked about trees because he's like, of course I'm still bitter. They're horrible people. Why should they get that? And this tree grows next to him. And he goes, perfect. A place to sit in the shade while I wait for them to be destroyed. And he sits at the tree. And the worm, who's kind of like his conscience, a Pinocchio, if you will, chews the tree down and lets the bitterness fall. And so then he is stuck in the desert, in the sand, just letting his bitterness kind of kill him in a way. Like the sun is going to, his asparagus, he'll dry out. So I think he ends up going after the worm, and that's kind of where the story ends. But I remember as a kid thinking that's so silly. You just talked about the hope that they have, and they just said they would turn from their ways, and it looks like they actually are going to turn from their ways, and yet you're still bitter? You're still bitter about it. So you're going to sit here, like it's, as a kid, I was like, that's super silly that he's still going to wait for them to be destroyed after just telling them they won't be destroyed. Yeah. And so anytime I have bitterness now, I have to think about, am I just being silly right now? Am I being an asparagus sitting in the desert? Because I gotta stop that. I gotta stand back up. Stop being silly.
Yeah.
But
we need a sticker that says bitterness is silly.
Billiness
or
is silly.
Billiness?
Billy? Yeah, don't be a Billy.
Don't be a Billy.
I was thinking I need a sticker that said, am I being an asparagus in the desert?
Oh, that's pretty good too. Like t-shirts.
That'd be a very
It's a deep cut.
long sticker.
It's perfect.
You can layer the text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Don't be an asparagus in the desert.
If it's a t-shirt, that should be on the back.
Unless
in the desert.
Yeah. All right.
There was a thing that I learned a few years back. I learned a lot of things, but always a few years back. And a few could be like last year or like 30 years ago. So here we go. That said, when it comes to sharing what's going on, the hurts that you carry, is it an open bleeding wound? Is it something that's being stitched up? Is it a scar? And if you try and share things too early when they're not clean, are you actually just getting an infection? Which sounds weird, but like you're just opening the wound up. Now everything can come in. Yeah. And so there is something to the timing of dealing with the bitterness. Like you have to walk through, but you have to be able to do some triage on your own heart when you get hurt. And if you don't do that triage first and you go and you start opening it up, you're not ready to love people and to take care of people and to forgive people. And then you end up in this place where you almost like you have gangrene, right? Like it's going to bleed out on other people. It's going to be messy. And so there's a unique challenge to how we open up, when we open up, when we allow that work to be done. It is okay for us to say, hey, I'm hurting, but I'm going to need some time and go to God and kind of work through some of that stuff. And so you're talking about just this like open wound, right? Like that. And it is when you share too much too fast. The teens call it trauma dumping. You're welcome.
That's great.
You're actually just creating opportunity for some bitterness to hold root. And so how you go through it at the beginning does change how it's going to impact you later on, which I just think is a ridiculously painful process. But you're right. How often do we sit and we just look at, how often do I say I forgive someone? But then I look back and I go, I may have said I forgive them, but I hope they burn.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
but I hope they stub their toe real hard.
right. Like that's
their pinky toe.
Pinky
right?
toe.
Because I'm human and I want them to suffer the way that they've made me suffer. Because I'm human and I want justice. Because we are justice oriented. God is a justice God. Like, and so I want them to pay for what they did to me, but I also don't want to pay for what I've done to others. So, well, I mean, depends on the thing. Sometimes we like torture ourselves with that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's a lot of good stuff in there. Like, I know for me, Heather was talking about essentially the idea that just because it's like your hurt is maybe invisible to you or you haven't acknowledged it, it's still growing something. And I think ultimately, or just maybe a personal example. So my wife and I were just talking about, we're in our mid to late 30s and like firmly adults. Fair?
Yeah.
Late 30s, you're an adult, right? That's pretty.
I hope so. Yeah.
So what?
And wanting
adult.
to like grow, and so like acknowledging maybe things that we wouldn't normally like even go there. Sorry, we're all worried. We're so worried about the water.
I was so hard. I was like, don't look at them. Don't look at them.
Is that?
No, I'm so.
No, I was dying because I was like, I grabbed it and he grabbed it and I went, dang it, Joey. Okay, it's my turn, not your turn.
Okay.
We're doing good.
That's perfect.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, if you laugh, it'll be fine. But one of the things I told her, I said, I feel like I have this sort of rooted, sort of low grade frustration or anger.
She's
What?
dying over there.
My throat did not make a
made eye
weird sound.
contact, and I was like,
I'm listening.
Hey, this
Yep,
is
I
good.
know.
We're good.
You're
We're
good.
good.
Go on.
And so I like said it, but I'm not like an angry person. At least I don't think people would say that. I'm goofy, like a child in that kind of way. So anyway, but the point being, like, so I say this thing, and so I've been on this journey of like trying to unpack that. And this weekend, she had mentioned kind of like, hey, the root of bitterness is hurt. And then like the symptom of bitterness is like anger and frustration, this idea. And so again, driving home, I'm like, oh no. Like, I'm like trying to figure out why I'm angry, but it's actually that I'm bitter about this hurt. And so it's this moment of like identifying this thing that I have not let go of, that I didn't even know existed until I knew it existed, but I couldn't name that was like the root of this thing until like 3 days ago. So I'm having this sort of like weird realization of a hurt that I kind of like rubbed dirt in and moved on from. And so I think sort of the challenge for me, at least how my brain works with this stuff, was like allowing myself to sort of work backwards from the symptom. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
like, oh man, why am I angry? Like, there's all these good things in my life. Well, if you work backwards, it all lands to this one person years ago. And, now trying to work through, like, what does it actually mean to bless him? I just let the cat out of the bag. It's a guy. Sorry.
We all know who now.
Yep. I just
There's
basically said his
only
name.
Billions of
Yeah.
there's only one guy it could be.
Sorry about that. Sorry. But like working through, like, I've said the words that I blessed this person, thinking that I had like, but I don't think I realized the depth or the actual, maybe I couldn't identify the actual hurt. And so I think this message started to get in my space because I in a similar way have always thought like eventually this catches up to him. Like after I watched him do this to so many people, and I was just the line of a lot of people in that cycle or whatever, feeling like, oh, I bless you. But really, I think what I was saying, to your point, Kelsey, was like, it'll catch up.
Yeah.
And like feeling good about that. And then, so now I'm wrestling with that sort of, I don't know if that's guilt or whatever that is for feeling that way. And so I think that's what I'm working through right now is like, what does it actually mean to like truly forgive, and how, and sort of like bury it. It's probably a mixed metaphor.
It feels like some things we think we're fully healed from, and we give up fully, and it feels like sometimes they leave a scar, and so the scar doesn't hurt anymore. But sometimes you may feel that scar. You might, like, I have a scar on my chin when my chin exploded, and that's a longer story. But every once in a while when I'm shaving, I feel that scar there, and I remember the day that it happened. And so sometimes I have a choice. Do I try to relive that moment of when my chin exploded? And it wasn't like an angry moment, like I didn't get cut by anybody. It was just I was being dumb. But do I relive that pain?
Yep.
And it has to be a conscious choice, or do I just go, there's a scar, and just keep shaving, right? But I think sometimes when we feel a scar, like we used to have cats, and one time I woke up and my cat was laying with her belly up, and my arm went down, and she did not like that, so she just ran up my arm, and I was just scraped all up, and I still have a scar. So sometimes when I feel that, I could think, oh man, that stupid cat. Or I can go, oh, I missed that cat. Or, oh, I remember the times that was good. But it depends where does our mind go? Does our mind go back to that bitterness? Is that bitterness really gone? Does that scar still hurt?
Yeah.
Is that something I've really, truly worked past and given to God to take away? But
isn't it a bummer to live in a kingdom that is focused around, I have to forgive them even if.
Yeah.
Even if they never know, even if they never whatever. But that means that I have to every morning wake up and remember that I forgave them.
Yeah.
Like every morning I have to choose that. Like I have to decide, that's right, I've released them from it. Even if I have feelings, I now have to go carry those feelings. They do not. That's the word forgive is actually to separate. And so like when the disciples would leave a space, they would leave Jesus. That's the same word, like to literally separate and say, this is no longer carried on that person. And so by forgiving them, I'm separating the event from who they are in Jesus, right? They're not defined by my feelings about them, but that doesn't mean I don't have the feelings. So how do I choose this to separate the feelings from this person and trust that God has this person? That doesn't mean I'm going to be in relationship with them, right? But it means I'm going to separate. I'm no longer holding them accountable to that thing, but I still have to carry the weight of what that thing was.
Yeah.
And so now I have to go do the work, and that's not fair. But honestly, the kingdom isn't fair. The kingdom is something different, right? The kingdom of God is about releasing people, freeing people, helping this become a space and a place where we do free one another from these burdens, even if that means I now have to go work through something that wasn't mine in the first place to work through. And that's hard to reconcile in my mind, except for the fact that I know Jesus does that with me. Like if it wasn't for like going back to that very fundamental, Jesus is separating my sin from me.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it. Like I think I would genuinely wait until every person that hurts me gets what's coming. And it would just not be a very joy-filled life. And yet when I have those moments where I can separate and I work through the things and I just see how God is blessing me through that and pray for them and for them to have blessings and see that happen in their life and God use that, like how much more joy is there in that than sitting in the bitterness?
Yeah.
So God knows, but I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I don't know.
Well, and no, I mean, I think too, it's, boy, these are two very, very radically different thoughts. So I'm just going to like piggyback off what you said for a second. I think if I'm being super transparent, what ultimately like clicked in my heart and in my mind that like Jesus is exactly who he says he is, is that I started watching him take my hurt and use it for good. Not that he caused it or like did it, but God could take this thing that was like heinous or where I felt like not only could I not be redeemed, but like also this could bring no good, and somehow he brings good in it, you know. And so a good example, sort of my first real church job ended in a very bad way, and I was wronged. Like if you hear the story, you'd be like, oh yeah, for sure. Like
I've heard the story.
Yeah,
you were wronged.
So, and I had already come to the conclusion like God uses stuff, but in the moment I was not thinking that.
Right.
You know, for the first couple of years, and then slowly over the next 7 years, as people came into my life that were in ministry who were hurt, I watched God use this thing that happened to me to like help people work through that and help restore confidence in the church and sort of turn the tide. And like God used that, you know, and then to find out the guy that really inspired that in me, I did not realize the depth of hurt that he had come through, that sort of he got used in my own life. So just like that was a radical thing that as I saw it, I was like, man, like I've never seen anything like this, where God takes these things that are like heinous and uses somehow like is able to use it for good. And so, you know, I think that for me was like what finally was like the surrendering of my life. Like if God can do that, like I want to be a part of that.
This feels like it's a nothing thing. So if it is, just cut it out. But like just a small example of that, like not because I definitely I've been through a lot of loss in my life, and I've seen it transform the way I've been able to communicate to students who are going through loss and parents who are going through loss in a lot of different ways. But going back to the cat example, after the cat ripped up my arm, I had a huge gaping wound. And so my mom taught me how to doctor a wound. And a couple years ago, I was working at a Starbucks, and we had this 4-foot step ladder. It was like 100 pounds. It was huge. I don't know why. And it fell on a barista's leg and cut open like this huge gash. And she was panicking. She didn't know what to do. And so I sent some baristas to cover the floor off their lunch early, and I came back and I doctored her leg. And she was like, how do you know how to do this? Like, it's kind of a serious cut. It's kind of a serious gash. This is more than just normal first aid. I was like, oh, like I got hurt a lot as a kid. Like a lot of cuts, a lot of bruises. My mom always made sure that I knew how to clean this out, how to make sure it didn't get infected. Right. Yeah. My mom, I guess in a way, was teaching me how to deal with the physical bitterness. But I mean, not that she wasn't teaching me the rest, but it's not just the big things that will help transform, because when I told her that, she then started to realize things that she learned growing up from her hurt and started helping other baristas out too. But yeah.
I mean, honestly, that is this series really is like the tactical toolkit for open emotional wounds, spiritual wounds, non-physical wounds. You're bleeding out. You're like, just forgive it.
It's okay. Just say I'm sorry. Okay. Just forgive it. Yeah.
Look the ladder in the eyes.
Look the ladder in the eyes. Use an I feel statement.
I release you from this.
Sorry. I feel like I've seen that happen before. So that was kind of my moment of like, okay.
But I mean, I guess on a more serious note, like I said, I lost my father in 2017. And I then had a student go through a very significant loss. After that, like quite serious. And I saw the ways in which I dealt with my father's loss. Yeah. And I may have gone at that wound a little too quickly. I may have opened that up to share with everybody. And that's a much longer story. My dad was a big pillar in the community. And so I felt like it was my responsibility to let everybody watch as I cleaned this wound. And that led to some more troubling things down the line, that I had some very kind doctors, I don't know in this metaphor, help me work through, and God has really helped close that wound up. And it will forever be something that is on my heart, and forever something that I'm sad about, but it was never something that I'm bitter about. Yeah. But because of that hurt, because of those things I went through, and because of the bad way that I took it, when I had a student go through the same, they were like, well, do I tell everybody? Do I tell my small group? Do I tell, what do I do? And I was like, let's take it one step at a time. And what they needed is just one person to listen, one person who wasn't going to blow things out of proportion or take advantage. They just needed one person. Yeah. And because of the hurt that I went through, those hours of crying, all those things, I was able to help them. And that made it 1,000% worth it. And I honestly know at the same time, my dad would have said the same thing. As much as he misses being here with us and our family, his heart was for students. His heart was for people. And so if anything of his life could be used to help somebody, that's what he used it for. So
that's cool.
There's an expression that says God doesn't waste anything, right? Like he's not going to he can't make someone sin. Like he is completely separate from sin. So when someone sins against us, he didn't cause that pain, but he's not going to waste it. And I just think that's sometimes the only hope that I can hold on to, but it does help if you can walk through it in the moment before you get to the point of bitterness. Once you're bitter, you're going to have to go back and do some work, and you're probably going to have to make some apologies along the way. But that's okay. God doesn't waste it.
Well, and earlier this week, like sort of zooming out, one of the realities of just our lives, and if you're in, if you're new to anything that's like any kind of faith or spiritual life, or maybe you've been a part of the church or whatever for a long time, like, number one, God's not done with you. But number two, like spiritual formation or the idea of like growing in relationship with the Lord isn't something you accomplish. It's sort of this ongoing thing. And I think like the way that my brain works is I really like to check off boxes. And so I kind of want to be like, spiritually formed, move on to, self-actualization or something.
Done and checked off.
Check out. I did it, guys. But I think the reality is like relationships don't work that way. That wasn't the intention of like a life where you get to walk with the Lord. And so I think what this entire series has reminded me is that, and I guess Heather really mentions this in the message over the weekend when she's talking about forgiveness. Like, you have to be willing to admit you're hurt. You have to be willing to admit like the bitterness to let it even begin to be healed in a healthy way. And so I think for somebody, and maybe this is just for people who are like me, who just wants to check a box, what's really important to hear is like, you're being spiritually formed, and to continue like on that journey, there has to be some admission of like these things. And it's a really cool process. That doesn't mean it's super easy. I'm kind of wrestling with what does it mean to actually forgive this person? In my heart, I really don't want to see them again, which sounds horrible. But that's real. And so like, what does it actually mean? And so I think, I thought there were a ton of good, really, really good examples, but I think just being reminded that like spiritual formation is not really this destination. It's this sort of posture towards like allowing the Lord to speak into your life in these areas that maybe are even hidden. I think that was the thing that really struck me this week, obviously, as I'm coming face to face with something I didn't know existed until a few days ago. But I mean, that's a kind of a real thing. So anyway, one last question, and then I know I'm like way over my time. I'm so sorry, guys. So forgiveness. I'm gonna sort of preface this, and then I'm gonna let you respond. So I think I'm way quicker to forgive others than I am to forgive myself. Two-part question. One, is that true for you? Two, how have you seen that sort of play out in your own life?
It's tough. When I was younger, I was very self-analyzed, and I would forgive everyone immediately. I always just thought it was my problem. I thought I was the one messing up. It wasn't them. It was my fault that they messed up. And that was tough. And so that led to a lot of things, including a lot of bullying and things like that. But as I've grown older and become more confident in who I am as a child of God, as a son of God, and just my own identity, I realize that's not the case all the time. And so not that I'm putting more blame on others. I think there are some things which I will immediately blame myself for, whether they are me or not. And there are other things in which I will hold the tightest of resentments. I will hold the most bitterness, like a stake of bitterness goes into my heart immediately. And for me, it's friendships.
Sure.
If you hurt my friend, like that's a line that's really hard to uncross in my heart, even if I took part in that.
Sure.
I don't always reflect on myself that way. That being said, if I somehow hurt anyone, it brings me to tears. I don't know what it is. And I will rack myself over and over trying to figure out, how did I do it? How can I never do this again? I beg for forgiveness. Even if it was, I one time was not careful with a hot glue gun, because it was the first time I had a hot glue gun, and I singed a girl's arm for 0.0 of a second. It just went just the tip, and she went, ow. I cried. I like have like a panic attack right there, and she was my girlfriend at the time. She's like, no, I don't know what to do here. It's okay. Like, and it was just immediately, and she was like, well, no, I shouldn't have had my arm on the table next to your hot glue gun. I was like, no. I should have never turned it on. Should have just never come here. Yeah. Should have gone home. I should go home. Right. It was that kind of thing.
I'm going to burn myself now.
Yeah. So like, I need to know what you feel. No, please don't do that. But I think it depends on what the solution is. And it's something that I still have to work through and with God with about my friends, because it's not okay just to get immediately bitter.
Yeah.
And vice versa. I need to be more forgiving to myself, because we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to hurt each other. And it's not fair for me if a friend puts themselves in front of me while I'm doing something. If I'm riding a bike and someone jumps in front of the bike, it's not fair for me to do that to myself, to be mad that I was riding a bike. How dare you ever ride a bike? Like, so I'm working through that right now.
Yep. Were you going to say, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
For me, I'm slowest to forgive. That's how we're going to say that. Slowest to forgive people that I think should know better, which I think I should know better about everything. So I'm pretty hard on myself. but I'm probably that hard on anyone else that I say you should know better. So like, I work in a church world. Like, I think the higher up you work in that church organization, you should know better. So I'm going to hold you accountable to that, which honestly, there's some biblical truth to that, but that's a whole different story for a different time. But like, if I think you should know, if I think, and that's I think you should know, that's actually not fair all the time. So I hold people accountable to the level that I think they should know. So parents are going to hold more responsibility than kids. So I'm going to be slower to forgive a parent than I am a kid. Kids, I'm like, oh, you don't know. You don't know. And if you don't know, I can't hold you accountable to that. And it sounds fair and just until I'm putting expectations on people that aren't fair and just, which includes on myself. So, yeah, I don't know that it's a person, but it's how much I think.
Yes. Were you going to say something?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a lot harder for me to forgive myself, kind of like you guys were saying, but also hard to forgive people who have hurt people that I care about.
Oh,
like that's probably the hardest one for me. Like if you have transgressed against me, if you have done something wrong to me, much easier to forgive than if like you hurt my sister.
Sure.
The gates of hell are waiting for you. Like that's like I'm like, or like you, like you hurt. Like if anything bad ever happens to like my parents or my siblings or like Dan or like my best friends or whatever, I'm like, it's gonna be really hard for me to say that I forgive that you did that to them. Just like a very protective, like don't let anything bad happen to them. So it's that's probably the hardest. But I also kind of like you were saying, like you should know better to yourself. I say that to myself, but I give so much grace to like people who have wronged me.
Yeah.
Like, oh well, I would never, like I should have never done that to you.
Yeah. Like I shouldn't have been wearing those shoes, and when you pushed me over and stole them from me, I shouldn't have been doing that.
That's totally on me. That's a me thing. I'm really sorry,
when
guys.
you stole my car, I shouldn't have been driving there.
I should have.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I just talked to my therapist about this, so you're welcome. Open wound, here you go. It's actually something we do when we're trying to protect ourselves. Because if I can be at fault, I could have prevented it, and now I'm not out of control. Someone doesn't have control over me.
Interesting.
So we have control issues. Congratulations.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oopsie.
So
No surprise there.
You're like pot and kettle.
Yeah.
I'll end this with with a funny story. So I don't have, believe it or not, I don't have a lot of hobbies.
No, I don't believe it.
I
I don't
like,
believe that either.
No.
like I don't rollerblade.
Disagreed.
I don't.
Love
Is that the
rollerblade.
number one
First
hobby?
thing that
The
came
number
up.
one
The
hobby.
number one
You know,
hobby
all
in the
those
US
people
today.
out there
This article.
rollerblading.
Yeah.
Number one hobby, rollerblading.
Yep.
I don't surf in Indiana.
Yeah. I don't kayak.
Oh.
You know.
Big
I don't own
archery guy.
Nope. I don't have a paper shredder. Nothing. Okay.
What?
But I really enjoy making pizza.
Oh,
Like I'm on this.
Do you have a pizza oven?
I have a big green egg.
Okay.
I won it in a contest,
what?
which is a whole nother story.
It's a big
Green
thing that
egg?
you like. It's like a grill, but
yeah,
it's a thing.
Okay.
It's like a hipster thing
You know what's
Okay.
funny?
for 30-year-olds.
It's called a big green egg.
Yep.
But
It
if
looks
someone's
like
like,
it was a big
describe it, I would be like, it's like a big green egg.
It like
really
was
long
laid
pause.
by a dragon.
Don't you hate
Like-
when they name it what it is?
It's like exactly what it is. Yeah. So, so one of the things is I try out these different crusts. If you're ever interested, there are a lot of different crusts. They all really need a different heat like level, and the stone like has to be in there for a certain amount of time, whatever. So I have problems forgiving myself, but it plays out in funny ways. So over the summer, I was really excited. I made this pizza crust. It's like more like a traditional like fired pizza thing. Why is my throat making weird noises today?
I
I'm
have
so
not
sorry.
noticed
Anything
the
right
ones that
there.
you're talking about
So
right now.
sorry.
I only noticed the gigantic gulp you did earlier, but other than that,
Now we're all afraid.
Okay, I'm sorry. But I made this crust, and it like had to rise for 24 hours, and then and I put it on there, take it off, and it was on there for 3 minutes, which is like, and it was charred. I mean, this thing was so black and so crunchy, and so I had made a backup one, and I sort of made it right for my kids, and then I like punished myself and ate the other one.
I did the same with cookies.
And it does this weird thing where it like teaches me like never
To mess
do
up again.
this. Well, yeah. But I find that I sort of do that the same way, where it's like I force myself to relive the situation in this sort of unhealthy degree. And so like what's funny is my family is watching me eat this thing, and I'm like going you know, it sounds like I'm eating concrete. And it was horrible, like every bite of it. But I like tortured myself for no reason. Do you know what I mean? And it's like I had the hardest time, and so I think I watch some of those patterns when I get it wrong. I tend to like eat the burned pizza. Maybe that's a good
eat the burned pizza. So for
Another
me,
sticker.
it was cookies. My roommate and I would make cookies on Friday nights, and he was like, "No, we can only fit like half the raw cookie dough on this sheet," and I was like, No, sir. I can fit all of the raw cookie dough on
Yes,
one.
you can.
So I did that, and then beautifully just completely burned the bottom of every single one.
Perfect.
And it's okay because I bought a backup just in case. It was the first time we were using the oven.
Perfect.
And so I bought a backup, and so we made those, and those were lovely and gooey chocolate chip cookies. And then we sat down, and I took all the burnt ones and gave it. And he's like, "Well, don't you want the good ones?" I was like, No. You see, I'm not going to let a cookie go to waste. And so I brought a tub of ice cream over and would scoop ice cream, and I ate them, and you would hear like as I would cry the entire time. And it was about halfway through where I did not feel great because I had about half a gallon of ice cream and 28 cookies. Where my room was like, you didn't have to do that.
28 cookies was only halfway? I feel like that would be the whole thing.
It was a really small
think I
pan.
have
Well,
been
some of them.
any
So, well,
questions?
after like, because I would scoop a lot of ice cream, and I was like, oh, like I don't taste the burnt part at all. So then I'd like take one cookie, and like, nope, that's just charcoal. I'm just eating charcoal. But the next time it happened, because I did burn the cookies again. I'm not great. I'm learning. He was like, no, and he threw away the burnt cookies, and he said, just eat the normal, like it's okay. And so to have him reassure me on that, I don't eat burnt cookies anymore.
Can I actually make this like a
Please.
theologically sound
Yes.
set of burnt conversations?
Yes.
I wonder, and I don't know if this is everyone, I wonder if sometimes we do that with other people, where when they hurt us, we let ourselves feel bitter and we just hold the burnt cookies so that we won't let them come near us again. Yeah. But then when we turn to a new relationship, we bring the burnt cookies with us and we do the same thing. And so it actually becomes something that keeps us from engaging in those relationships. And so bitterness is actually a tool of the enemy to keep us alone.
Yeah.
And sitting with burnt cookies. So
Yeah.
That's very solid.
for whatever that's worth,
Those burnt cookies were
let
very
go
bitter.
of the burnt cookies,
Yeah, I bet they were.
get some good cookies. That's all I got.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't burn the pizza.
Pillsbury,
Don't
Toll
burn the
Toll
cookies.
House.
Well, this has been fun. I like you guys.
I
This
like
is
you
good.
too.
This is fun.
Do you say that every week?
I don't.
Yeah, you say that.
No,
to
do I?
everybody.
Here's what I'm
Half
gonna
is
say.
what
I've
Skylar
liked
said.
everybody
Right.
that's been on the podcast so far.
It would be really unfortunate if you said that you didn't like
He's like,
anybody
well,
on the
I've liked
podcast.
everyone but one person.
That one
I won't
was
say names,
not
but
us.
he.
You know. No. So, sort of wrap the series. I'll and Kelsey jump in if you want to have the last word. But wrapping up the series is really this sort of acknowledgement of like there's a reality that we tend, if it's not obvious now, we tend to hold offense and won't acknowledge it. But really what Scripture, what the heart of Jesus is doing is calling us to like heal from that. And I'm trying to think of like the lowest common denominator way of saying that, but just the idea that like if you're holding on to something, there is healing from that. And I think it begins with like being able to say it out loud.
Yeah. Maybe
it's just to yourself. But our prayer as a church would be able to walk with you through that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the fruit from this whole series. I know that it's stirred something in my life, in my heart, in a good way, in a challenging way, and so I think it'll be really interesting to see. But anyway, thanks for joining us, guys. We love you. We will see you Sunday, hopefully. I don't know why I said hopefully.
Hopefully.
That's not very.
You better be there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Wow.
We'll see you Sunday. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. For more information, visit madisonpark.church.